I call this regular meeting of the Village of Villa Park Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Let's start with roll call. Calvert, Hofstra, Jackson, Ludke. Here. Orlowski, Romano.
Here.
Schlinsky.
Here.
Lemieux.
Here.
I had two are present. With that, we have quorum. First item we have here is approval of minutes. It would be for the approval of the minutes of 5/11/23. Any amendments to the, or questions about the minutes? We have a motion?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. We have one agenda item tonight. Before we get started, I'm going to explain how the process works. We will start with staff input. Then we'll move to presentation of the petitioner. Following that, we will have public participation and questions. That would be when anybody from the public wishing to make a comment would be able to come up here to the podium and say a few words. We ask that you try to keep it to about 3 minutes. And then we have questions from the commission, any closing comments from the petitioner. Then we'll have discussion up here and then a motion if necessary and a vote if we have a motion. What I would ask is if you anticipate speaking tonight at all, stand now. I'll get you sworn in. And then when you come up, you'll state your name and address for the record. So if you think you're going to speak or think you might speak, stand now, because otherwise I'll have to swear you in individually later. Right. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you will give in this public hearing is the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the first item of business is petition PZ 2302, 1250 South Ardmore Avenue, special use for a new cell tower. Petitioner, Kendall Communications for TowerCo Infrastructure, Tony Phillips, owner, DuPage High School District 88. Mark, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this evening we have a special use request from TowerCo to place a new cell tower at 1250 Ardmore. This is in the far northwest corner of the property. The zoning ordinance specifically allows the ability to ask for a special use in this district. It also has a standard that the zoning ordinance requires new and modified towers to be set back from the property line adjoining any residentially zoned property a distance equal to the height of the tower. This is a 125-foot tower. Unless a lesser setback is required due to the type of transmission equipment or technology proposed by the applicant to be at a lesser distance. The proposed 125-foot tower is set back at a distance of 65 feet from the public right-of-way. The petitioner is requesting for a lesser setback to be required due to the technology that would prevent the fall radius of being no more than 50 feet. And I will point out that the request has to do with adjoining residential uses, but it also ties back to the residential zoning district, even though it's a school, and to the north is also residentially zoned, which is also not a residential use. Staff has a recommendation for approval with a potential condition to provide a gate on the south side of the bike path at the access. But I'll turn it over to Tony Phillips for his presentation.
All right.
My name's Tony Phillips with Kendall Communications, representing TowerCo. Address is 380 Kendall Place, Columbus, Ohio, 43205.
Okay.
We're proposing a cell tower on the school property. We're asking for the variance to setback. We provided the fall letter, which states that the tower will collapse upon itself. A fall letter. We call it a fall letter. Yeah. So from the manufacturer of the tower, they're engineers. It's designed to fall or collapse upon itself. So that's why we're asking for this reduced setback. The technology is, your ordinance says if the technology so warrants. The technology is there now to collapse. These towers can't collapse on themselves, so it'll stay within the lease area. It's a 125-foot tower for AT&T. We've provided coverage maps, which I'll go to in a second here, showing the coverage before and after. And it also will have FirstNet, which is a first responder network on there, which AT&T and the federal government have. It's a dedicated frequency for first responders. So if there's any type of a disaster, anything like where everybody's on their cell phone at the same time and nobody can get a signal, first responders will have an open channel for to communicate, which is it's a pretty big thing. And especially now with landlines, nobody has landlines anymore. And I can see there's people here that have questions, and there probably will be concerns about health and this and that. Which I want to remind the board that the federal government has stated that you cannot deny a project based on health. It's off the table. I don't know if you're aware of that, but you can't consider that. They've decided, whether it's right or not, I don't know, but you can't do that. And to be honest with you, your cell phone does exactly what that cell tower does. It sends and receives. So by putting it by your head, you're doing exactly what those towers are doing. Now, because the height of the tower is up at 125 feet, those antennas is categorically excluded from any type of emissions. In other words, by the time it comes down to the ground, you're almost at zero emissions up there, any type of RF exposure because of where it's at. You'd have to be like in a hot air balloon right next to it, really, to have any type of anything worse than what your cell phone is doing. So hopefully that answers some questions. I have a feeling that's probably one of the concerns here tonight. So this is the, I'm going to, how do I?
Just down.
Just down? Okay. So that's the, let's see if I can find a better look. It's not moving now. I'm going down, but it's not going. There we go. Okay. So that's the spot on the school property there. It's the northwest corner. Yeah, let's see if I can get another picture here.
Oh, you're zooming through there.
And sorry. Doesn't want to move the way I want it to move. Am I doing something wrong here? It's just not catching up to me.
Yeah, there's a little lag.
Okay, so that's how it'll look. There'll be a little access road on the south side of the bike path. We talked about having like a security gate or something there so cars can't park there. TowerCo has agreed to do that, to install the security gate, so that when there's service technicians, it's an unmanned facility, so it won't have any garbage or sewer or water use. It'll just be power and fiber to run the site. And that little access road will only be used maybe approximately once a month by a technician, just to check on the site, whatever. So he'll have a key to that gate, and then the gate to the compound. The compound will have a security fence around it, and it will also have room for multi-carrier, so it won't be just for one carrier. It won't be just for AT&T. It'll be actually an affordable support structure for additional carriers, additional equipment for this area. And it's hard to to get coverage. I think during COVID, everybody kind of realized that you needed better coverage. Not everybody's getting coverage at their house. Maybe at the office you have Wi-Fi and you have all these things, but when you get home and you're trying to work from home, your connectivity is a little limited. So we have to bring these towers, we have to bring this equipment into more residential areas. There's just no way around it. And with everybody canceling their landlines and all that kind of stuff, instead of having 50 telephone poles or 100 telephone poles down the street, you might have one support structure for the wireless technology, which is where we're going with that. So in all your GIS and all that type of stuff all runs off of these things. So it's pretty important to have this equipment. I'm going to see if I can move this one more time. This is just an aerial view. I just want to get the elevation. We're going to have landscaping around the site. That's it's not in color, but you can see that's all evergreens or arborvitaes or something around the tower, so you won't see the equipment from the ground, from the street level. You won't even really notice the low equipment. And then the high stuff, when you're driving by, until I got in this business, I never even noticed cell towers, to be honest with you. Now I see them everywhere because I'm in the business. But with that, we'll try and screen it. We're doing the screening per the ordinance. And that's the elevation. So right now, AT&T would be at the top, and then there's space for 2 other carriers and space on the ground for 2 other carriers' equipment. So it's an inviting, it's a place for new technology to come along with any other carriers to move over there where they have gaps in coverage. It's pretty, it'll be a nice, because TowerCo's rent, like their rent schedule and all that type of stuff is much cheaper than some of these other tower companies. So that's one of the reasons why, AT&T has partnered with Tower Codes to keep their rents down, and that also gets passed on to the consumer then, which is a pretty important thing, especially since we're all relying on our cell phones so much. This is the coverage before, without the site, and then this is the coverage with the site, should be, if it would catch up to me here. Come on. I don't want to hit it too fast here. Try again. There we go. And that's the coverage with the site. So you can see there's an increase in coverage right off the bat. You'll have better coverage, better capacity. That's without, and that's with, again. So we're filling a gap in coverage. We're providing, services that aren't there right now. And you want that. It's important to have that handoff as you're driving down the street, as you're wherever you live, whatever. You want to have that connectivity. So it's pretty important. And that's about it. Other than that, it's the cell tower, and we'll provide much-needed wireless services for everyone. And I guess, I don't know if you guys have questions now, or do we wait until there's public comment?
We'll ask those later. If we have any questions, we'll ask them later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm joined by Jason Woodward here, who's from Tower Code.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we'll move to public participation and questions. So if you have anything you want to ask or comments, you have about 3 minutes, please direct questions towards me. We'll compile a list of questions and give the applicant the opportunity to respond once we're done. Please try to keep your time to about 3 minutes. Be respectful, and then if you're coming up to speak after someone, you don't necessarily have to repeat every point they've made. It's fine to say, I support this project, I agree with the person in front of me, I don't support this project, I agree with all the reasons the person in front of me don't support this project. So feel free to use your 3 minutes, but it's also good to be brief when you can. All right, whoever wants to go first, name and address, and we'll go from there.
Good evening.
Hello.
I'm Tony Hall. I live at 101 West Leslie Lane, so
Ivy Lane?
Leslie, so right kind of within view of this. My question about this tower is, what besides kind of, not obscure, but like what is the direct benefit that the village will get out of putting up a 125-foot tower in an area where a lot of people walk around and, in my opinion, could be a potential eyesore? So I'd like to know, what are our direct tangible benefits to the village for doing this outside of kind of vague increased coverage? Like, I would like to know our direct benefit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kinga Kalutsky. I live on Kinga, K-I-N-G-A. Last name is Kalutsky, K-A-L-U-C-K-I. I live on 30 East Van Buren Street here in Villa Park, and I have several questions. If I go past my time limit, please let me know.
Okay.
The first question is this cell tower going to have 4G, 5G, or both 4G and 5G? If it does have 5G, will the 5G cells have to go on the streetlights and the ComEd poles throughout town in order for the service to work? Will this one tall tower cell cover all of Villa Park, or will other tall cell towers need to go up? Who owns the land for the proposed tower site? Are they selling this land to TowerCo? If selling, how much will they make? If they are leasing the property, how much will they make? How long will this permit be approved for? FirstNet is putting up the tower for the first responders to use only, not community members, correct? Is there any kind of problem with our emergency service communication and connection in Villa Park currently? If yes, what negative outcomes has the current problems created? Please be specific. Is the FirstNet only for major catastrophes? If yes, please provide us some specific examples of when this service would be helpful. Please explain how FirstNet will benefit the residents of Villa Park and first responders on daily basis. Has TowerCo been hired by a telecom carrier like AT&T to install this tower, or do they work with a carrier? And can other carriers add 4G, 5G cells to this tower, or is it only for FirstNet going forward? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Howdy.
Hello.
Ray Cheska? Ray Cheska. C-E-S-C-A. I'm glad to be here. If, Cheska, like Francesca. E-S-C-A, like the girl's name, Francesca. If you knew something was going to hurt your children or your siblings or your friends, you would fight like heck to prevent that from happening. Well, this is what you are facing right now with a decision to allow a 10-story cell tower designed to emit electromagnetic radiation based on a standard that is not applicable today. Let me explain. When the U.S. Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Subcommittee hearing was held on the future of 5G wireless technology and its impact on the American people and the economy, 5 executives from the wireless industry were the witnesses. After 2 hours of robust back-and-forth discussion on the global competition, U.S. expansion, and security of the 5G deployment, Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut took the mic and started to query the executives whether they have supported research on the public safety and biological implications of 5G technology, including the resulting levels of radiation. Stone-faced, the industry representatives conceded that they have not. So Blumenthal concluded that, quote, there really is no research going on. Not $1 of research. Is that right? The executive suddenly became deaf and dumb. Blumenthal then said, quote, so we're kind of flying blind here as far as health and safety is concerned. Is that right? The executives remained dead silent. This tells the whole story of why we must know everything about what is being promised. We are not a 5G laboratory. TowerCo, in their statement, states, quote, the FCC has determined a facility of this type is categorically excluded and will not be detrimental to the health, safety, and general welfare of persons in the vicinity. This location was selected to minimize the visual impact and will not be injurious to property values or future improvement. Wow. Those are huge promises when you just heard me say not $1 of research has been spent proving and justifying those statements. The Children's Health Defense sued the FCC and filed 11,000 pages of scientific and human evidence refuting FCC's claims of safety. The U.S. Courts of Appeal of the D.C. District Circuit found FCC guilty of not protecting the public's health since setting the guidelines in 1995, 27 years ago, when we all had a very simple flip phone. Today, we use a mobile device with the same power used to send the man to the moon, with no change in the guidelines. As for the effect on real estate value, TowerCo must have their head in the sand when promising that. Who would want a tower nearby? The National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policies, their large-scale EMF real estate study, found that there is an immediate 21% drop in the value if a cell tower is even close by. Are we flying blind here again? TowerCo is insulting the residents of Villa Park by even making those unfounded and false claims. Villa Park
Mr.
can
Cheska?
see right through it.
Mr. Cheska?
Let's not fly blindly or we will crash. So how do you feel? The tower is 100 100% safe knowing these facts?
You're at about 4.5 minutes. If you could give me some
Okay.
bullet points or a closing
I'm
statement.
at the end.
Yep,
Yeah,
thanks.
as Gene Bedley, a popular educator, once said, responsibility finds a way. Irresponsibility makes excuses. Let's be responsible. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Val Hopkins. I live in the Elgin area.
What area?
Elgin, but I work near here. I just want to say I've emailed a copy of something I'll be referencing to the president of Villa Park and the manager of Villa Park, just to look over in your leisure time. Again, my name is Val Hopkins. I want to express my thanks and gratitude for allowing me this time to speak. I may get emotional. In reference to the petitioner, Tower Co. response in part states, quote, "The FCC has determined a facility of this type is categorically excluded and will not be detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of persons in the vicinity. This location will not be injurious to property values," end quote. Repeating what Ray had said. I'm going to be referring to the Pittsfield Board of Health emergency order. Now, contrary to that statement that I just read, I'd like to refer now to the City of Pittsfield, Massachusetts emergency order to issue a cease and desist order against a cell tower company. Quote, "Soon after the wireless facility was activated and began transmitting, the city started to receive reports of illness and negative health symptoms from residents living nearby the facility, including headaches, sleep problems, heart palpitations, ringing in the ears, dizziness, nausea, skin rashes, memory, and cognitive problems. It is documented that the neurological and dermatological symptoms experienced by these residents are consistent with those described in peer-reviewed scientific and medical literature as being associated with exposure to pulsed and modulated radio frequency, or RF,
Exposure and what?
to pulsed and modulated radio frequency, or RF radiation, including RF from cell towers. The City of Pittsfield residents have submitted to the Health Board over 11,000 pages of evidence with over 1,000 peer-reviewed scientific and medical studies which consistently find that pulsed and modulated RFR biological effects can lead to short and long-term adverse health effects in humans, either directly or by aggravating other existing medical conditions," end quote. This is from credible experts that have documented and testified about the dangers to human health and environment caused by exposure to wireless radiations. There are numerous resident testimonies in this emergency order, including an adult and their 2 children developing headaches and insomnia after the facility became operational. They left their home because it essentially became uninhabitable. Within days of transmitting, residents reported to the health department headaches, nausea, dizziness, palpitations, insomnia, and other symptoms. The Board of Health conducted a 15-month-long investigation and found harm from the tower, deemed their homes uninhabitable due to levels of RF radiation that were well within FCC's antiquated guidelines. Furthermore, I'd like to mention now, in regards to this said tower, I'd like to mention how this facility could potentially interfere with smaller religious communities, such as the Islamic Foundation that is located nearby this tower that they want to put up in Villa Park.
Right. So
Please listen and hear what I've said.
Excuse me one sec. So you're about 3.5 minutes. If you
I'm
could.
almost done.
Okay. Some bullet points and a wrap-up would be good.
Please listen and hear what I've said. Let's have Pittsfield, Massachusetts be an example. Do we really want to see this Villa Park community abandoning their homes because they are too sick to live here? The village of Villa Park, including the property owner, could potentially be vulnerable to lawsuits and legal matters. Is it really worth the risk? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Tyra, Tyra, Lydon, Lydon. I'm at 416 South Oakland Avenue here in Villa Park.
Oakland?
Yes, Oakland. First of all, I'd like to take this time to thank you for meeting with me today and to thank you all of you, for your services and your personal sacrifices that you make on behalf of our community every day. On behalf of my family, I would like you to know that it does not go unnoticed. I would like to present some suggestions regarding the tower. Also, I would like to present my personal experiences with radiation frequency levels, and then finally present a question. If the tower is built, I believe it would be in the best interest of the village board and community if the following reasonable actions be taken and given serious consideration. Before the tower goes up, hire an independent engineer to take readings in the school and on the surrounding school property grounds while school is not in session. After these readings are documented, have the engineer take readings in the school and on the surrounding school property grounds while the school is in session. After the tower goes up, repeat the process. Now you have a baseline allowing you to compare and contrast the readings. Use these readings to adjust the radiation frequency levels when needed. Make this information available to the village website. Those are my suggestions. Here's my personal story. I'm one of the many who do not respond well to certain levels of radiation frequencies. I must take precautions with my iPhone, my laptop, my routers, and my modems. If I don't take these precautions, I experience severe dizziness, loss of breath, and nausea. To prevent these symptoms, I must do the following on a daily basis. My 5G iPhone 13 has to be set at 4G levels with a cover protector. My laptop must be plugged into the wall, grounding it. In other words, my home Wi-Fi is completely turned off, preventing the Wi-Fi radiation from escaping into my immediate surroundings. My modems and my routers are encased in Faraday cages, which again prevent the radiation from escaping into my surroundings. That's my personal story. Here's my one question. It has been a lingering question on my mind since hearing about the tower, and that question is, who will be held accountable should the kids, the staff members, and/or citizens in our community get sick from what will be radiating from the tower? Will it be the village? Will it be the school board? I was hoping you could shed some light. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Nancy Perlman, that's Perlman. Good evening. I'd like to extend a special thank you to the Plan Commission members for your dedicated service to Villa Park. I'm Nancy Perlman from Glen Ellen. I'm part of the leadership team in Illinois who has been working with state legislators and local officials to restore local control to the municipalities for the placement of cell towers and small cells. I'm here to see how I can be of help to you. Tonight, I'm asking that you deny the recommendation of the special use permit to Tower Co. for the new cell tower at 1250 South Ardmore Avenue and hold all applications for 4G or 5G installations in Villa Park for now. And there are many reasons to do so. There is the issue of the applicant being in compliance with the federal law, the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, and this law says that the new cell tower that's going up to be put in the environment must have a NEPA checklist completed. A former FCC NEPA attorney made that clear to me, and I didn't see a NEPA checklist in the agenda packet. Part of the NEPA checklist is an FCC radio frequency compliance report that includes the lowest and highest levels these antennas are capable of emitting for public exposure. As you know, the FCC was sued for having radio frequency guidelines that are 27 years out of date. Now they're reviewing all these pages of peer-reviewed scientific research studies proving biological harm and 200 letters from people whose health has been injured by this technology. It's crucial that the FCC establish new safe guidelines for radio frequency limits. Has the applicant provided you with studies proving 5G is safe? Probably not, as their marketing is propaganda with no facts behind it. The topic is very complex and it needs time to be looked at in detail to understand how approving this would negatively impact Villa Park. And here are examples of municipalities in the western suburbs who did so. The Mayor and Village Board of Lockport voted no and turned down a cell tower from being placed on school property by a park and baseball diamond where houses backed up to it. They took the time to look at the information they were given. I've been working with my village, Glen Ellen, and last month, the Glen Ellen Plan Commission voted to deny the recommendation of special use permits for 2 cell towers to put 5G antennas on them. Originally, the village staff suggested they vote to approve recommending these. The Plan Commission was presented with lots of facts and data by the public that was very informative and helpful. After 2 more meetings and time to review the information, they voted to deny the recommendation of the special use permits to our village board. There are many other communities across the country who are doing the same thing. Please vote to deny or at least table this topic for now, so you have a chance to review all the facts and data we're presenting with you tonight, so you can make the most informed decision possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Those actually go to the chair.
Thank you. I'll make sure those go into the record. All right, anyone else wishing to speak at this time? This will be your last opportunity at this hearing. All right, seeing no one, we will move to questions from the commission. And so I will give you an opportunity to answer any of those questions that you'd like to answer. And then I'll also run through the list. I will also run, if I feel like you missed some of the questions that need to be answered, I'll ask who will have questions up here. But I'll give you a few minutes to run through. Yeah, whenever you're ready, just come up and just state your name and address so the court reporter has it.
Hi, my name is Jason Woodward. I am the Senior Vice President with TowerCo. Address is 5000 Valley Stone Drive, Cary, North Carolina.
What, North Carolina?
Cary, C-A-R-Y. So I pretty much wrote down all the questions, so I'll try to hit all the ones I can if possible. So the benefit of the tower was the first question. The main reason for this tower is for AT&T coverage, but also for FirstNet. So to kind of give a little bit of a background on FirstNet, when 9/11 and Katrina occurred, the federal government really came to fruition that there was a serious issue with the fact that they didn't have an interoperability system for all first responders to basically perform simultaneously if there was a national or local emergency. Excuse me. So one of the things that they did was they created a FirstNet committee which allocated $9 billion in order to build out a nationwide network in order to have first responders have prioritization over everyone else. What occurred during 9/11 and Katrina was the fact that when the towers were initially hit and then when everybody was stranded in Katrina and there was a bunch of issues, everybody was trying to utilize their phone. First responders couldn't get out quickly. They couldn't get prioritization and their phones just went busy and the system basically locked up. At that point, once the federal government allocated the $9 billion isn't going to get you very far in the sense of building out states. So what they did was they put together a policy that had every single governor, all 50 states, have to either opt in or opt out for FirstNet. The federal government ended up basically joining with AT&T, where AT&T allocated $45 billion worth of infrastructure funds to their existing network in order to allocate what they call Block 14, which is a block of spectrum that is basically used for first responders. And the way that that works is, if I work at your police department and I am working on FirstNet, or I utilize FirstNet, there is a SIM card inside of your phone, and I have prioritization no matter if I'm texting my wife to go get pizza at the local pizza store, or if there is a local emergency. He has prioritization, or she has prioritization at all times. So just because they are a first responder, let it be ambulatory, hospital, police, fire, all the data that goes into the squad cars, like your what we call data dump. So when you get pulled over by a police officer, he runs your license plate, all that comes over wirelessly. That all comes through the antennas on the back of the squad car. That basically comes through FirstNet. That gets prioritization over anybody using an iPad, watching video, YouTube, putting stuff on Facebook. It's all prioritized. So that was the purpose of FirstNet. So AT&T teamed up with FirstNet. They then put FirstNet antennas on every single site. The reason for that is the governors basically all agreed unanimously across the country that they will sign up and approve FirstNet in their states. Illinois, if I'm not mistaken, was signed in 2017 or 2018. I don't have the exact date. But at that point, AT&T has since allocated FirstNet at that juncture, like right when it was signed. At that point, and I'm not going to go down the fear-mongering kind of avenue, but we live in a society where we have a lot of problems at school, so I'll just leave it there. FirstNet was only applicable to first responders for the longest time. They have now opened the door for principals, superintendents, specific people at schools to now apply for FirstNet, so that they now have prioritization, because now it's becoming a national security issue that there is not the ability for, the people who are within the building to make calls to first emergency responders, 911, things of that nature. So they have now opened the door for 10, let's just say seasoned professionals or superintendents or principals to have FirstNet phones. So we have been in conversation, AT&T jointly, with the school to apply potentially FirstNet at the school, so that they have that utilization capabilities. So that is really the main purpose of why this tower is being developed in that general area. You also have the Islamic Center across the street, applies to that, but it also applies to just general public. So if there's a fire down the street, the fire department's pulling probably off of that tower. It's going to basically support all the first responders that are utilizing FirstNet at that point. So hopefully that answers that question. 5G. This is the biggest misnomer in the industry. I mean, and everybody, I think when kind of COVID happened, I've heard everything, and I've been in the industry for over 25 years. I've heard everything that, 5G causes COVID and it reduced our immune system and things of that nature. 5G is no different than what's already there. 5G is basically just a bigger pipeline of fiber capability to the cell site, which gives more data and faster performance than what it did over 4G. It's just an evolution of technology. 5G does work in conjunction with things called small cells. Small cells are actually placed in very dense, condensed areas to offload cell phone traffic next to baseball stadiums, concert venues, areas where there's just a lot of commercial traffic, like the grocery store, and you have two maybe cell sites that are pretty close to each other. You really can't shoehorn one in between because they cause what they call cross interference. They'll cancel each other out. So what they do is they put small cells around, which just offloads what we call the foot traffic on the ground. It also helps the performance of the phone, makes it go really fast. So 5G, in a bigger picture, and this will hopefully help define what 5G is, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. We had a UHF channel called Channel 43. It had like Big Chuck Little John. It had Friday night movie theater movies for teenagers. It was a local TV channel. It was broadcast out of southern Cleveland and went all the way down and would transmit all the way down about an hour and a half further past south of Cleveland. That frequency that was used for UHF and TV has gone away because of cable and streaming and things of that nature. All the 5G frequencies that the wireless carriers are using are nothing more than repurposed UHF channels that the FCC basically said, okay, TV doesn't use it anymore. We're now giving it to you. You can now utilize it off the cell sites at just a lower wattage. So basically, it's just way shrunk down. So instead of having one tower that puts out 1 million megawatts of power to cover hundreds of miles, you now have small little towers that basically connect to a device that's really close for repurposed frequency. It's pretty common practice. So these frequencies that the carriers are using have been here since the 1940s, 1950s on television. There's no difference. There's just a lot of misinformation about 5G and how it is. And it's a marketing ploy for the carriers that say, hey, we have 5G, it's the greatest thing in the world. I mean, Xfinity is touting 10G, which is probably the weirdest thing I've ever heard. But hopefully that explains that. There was a question about who will own the land. We are leasing the land from the school. So the school is getting a monthly payment from TowerCo in order to operate so that the school can utilize the funds for whatever it is that they choose to. I don't dictate how that gets allocated to them. If I'm not mistaken, and I want to be accurate, I don't want to mislead, but we are in a position where we are actually, I believe, putting 10 years of payment up front in order to help the school with some capital improvement projects. So we're trying to do our best to kind of utilize the school to help out the taxpayers and put money towards a good cause with the schools. That's why we go to the schools in a lot of cases, not only for the FirstNet coverage, but also the financial benefit for them as well as for the community. I will not go into discussion about the lease rates. That was discussed probably at one of the school board meetings, and it was public knowledge, but I will leave that up to the school.
And just to clarify one point, when you say the school, you're talking about School District 88?
Yes,
specifically,
that is
because we
correct.
have multiple school districts
Yes, I'm
here,
sorry,
so-
yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for everybody
Yes,
here.
correct. So in regards to, is there any problem with the public safety or FirstNet or anything of that nature? There is not that I am aware of, and I am not a professional to comment on whether or not there is an issue with your public safety radio systems. What we're responsible for is we are contracted by AT&T to build the infrastructure. They do not want to own towers due to the fact that they don't want to be landowners. They want to worry about their network and their spectrum and their customers. They don't want to have to worry about property issues and things of that nature. My job is to build with my capital, fund the tower, pay for it, do everything. AT&T pays me a rent in order to operate on that tower. It keeps their costs down. But at the same time, I have the responsibility of working with the landowner in order to pay their fees as well as maintain the tower, take care of it, and make sure that there's no issues there. So when it comes back to FirstNet, there are not really any quote-unquote issues, but there are coverage gaps where AT&T is looking to fulfill areas to get better what we call in-building coverage, or areas where if there was an emergency that they do have coverage that's readily available. They have a responsibility to the customers as AT&T customers, but as well as the agencies that utilize AT&T FirstNet. And AT&T FirstNet can be, again, used by hospital, ambulatory, like all the ambulances actually, as they traverse you to a hospital, they literally run all their, your heart recordings, everything goes basically wireless. So all that goes over FirstNet. So they have a responsibility in order to make sure that that coverage is there for the community based off of the signature and the commitment from the governor when they signed in, and that's the commitment. So at one point, AT&T actually had to sit with the government officials and say, hey, we are absolutely committed to covering the state, and here is our plan to cover the state, and then they fulfill that and try to meet it. I I think I went over the fact that TowerCo was hired by AT&T. I think it's really important. There was a lot of comments about health effects. I raised my hand there because there is a liability issue for the board, and it's not a threat or anything like that. It's just a fact. So the Telecom Act of 1996 basically states that any public commission, zoning committee, planning commission is not to hear or make judgment of the project based off of health effects, due to the fact that the federal government licenses these frequencies. Its own, the frequencies are actually controlled and run by the FCC, which is the federal government. Their position is that you're not to technically hear those in the meeting, and they are not to be on record, but they're also not to be voted on. So I won't comment on any of the health effects situations. There was a lot of concern about, I love the magic number because I hear it constantly. It's always 21% of real estate value loss. I've been in this industry for over 21 or 25 years. I'm even saying 21. Yeah, I have projects where I have built towers that are sitting next to $800,000 homes when they were built with, and I currently reside in Michigan. My headquarters in North Carolina. I just got done working on a project with Pulte where they literally bought a parcel of property for $1.75 million. They literally built houses on it and the average price was $700,000 to $800,000 for every site. The most expensive house that was in that allotment is literally constructed next to two existing towers. One is a lattice tower, a guide tower that has wires that are coming down off of it. The next one has a monopole, and they're literally within 100 feet of each other. And if I was to literally reach out, you're probably less than 100 yards from the actual house that was $800,000. It just resold last year for $1.3 million. So if we are being affected by real estate values, my mom's a real estate agent, and one of the things that I hear the most of is location, location, location. But the second thing is, oh gosh, does my phone work? Because a lot of people work from home. It's a fact of today's generational situation. We rely on our phones. It's technically an essential service. See if there's anything else here.
It will also have regular antennas too. It won't be just Versant.
Yes, so
It will have AT&T out, regular AT&T service.
I think there was a question about will other carriers be applicable to this site? Yes, that is the case. So our job, or my job at TowerCo, is once I build the infrastructure, we basically call it vertical real estate. Once I build it, my job is to try to lease it up to other carriers. Let it be Verizon, T-Mobile, or Dish. Those are the four national carriers basically in the United States. Chicago had 5, U.S. Cellular. U.S. Cellular has moved on, and they went to a different, more rural market. But we do have the ability to lease that tower to other carriers. They do promote what they call their quote-unquote 5G, which is basically a bigger pipeline of fiber and capabilities of fast speed. One of the things that they are bringing that I'm welcoming and that I'm seeing a big trend set is, T-Mobile and Verizon are bringing a broadband solution. We call it fixed wireless. So it doesn't necessarily actually just work on your phones, but now you have the capability of having internet service that literally you put a modem in your house and it pulls off of that cell site, and you have another option for internet other than the local cable company. And listen, I'll be the first one to admit my cable bill is over $300 a month. If I went to fixed wireless and I had a site closer to my house, I'd be paying $50 a month. I'd be jumping all over that because it's just a better deal for a lot of people. So that's a new model that's kind of coming out there as well. With the fixed wireless, it gives consumers other options in the community to get away from what we call the fixed cable play to where...
The fixed cable what?
Play.
Play?
Play, P-L-A-Y. Yep. So it would be a situation where, they have more or less like a monopoly on the area. Like I'm stuck with Comcast. If I don't use Comcast, I'm doomed. So there was a question about the FCC and the NEPA. The NEPA has to be done on this site. It is done. It's complete, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's complete. We have to do that on all our cell sites. That is absolutely mandatory. The federal government requires us on every single site to complete NEPA, SHPO, TCNS, State Historical Society. We have a view shed issue to verify. View shed. So what it is we have to notify every single Indian tribe that once had claim to that property. They have to basically report back to us that there was never a burial ground there, historical area, or a settlement, or basically any form of historical value there. State Historical Society, we have to let the state of Illinois understand exactly what the project we're doing. They have to comment on the process. They have a say on what we can and can't do. We have an environmental. We have to look at bird migration. We have to look at, my gosh, like there was a whole series. Oh, nesting animals, any endangered species. I mean, it's just a laundry list of things. Indiana bat is a protected species now. We can't clear trees over certain periods from March 31st all the way until October 1 because of nesting periods. That is all required, and that has to be done. If you build a cell site without that, you might as well just pack your bags and go away because you're doomed. But what's interesting about that is I can sit in front of you as a board, and if I requested to build a Pizza Hut there, I don't have to do any of that, which is crazy. But the reason is because it's a federally licensed entity through the FCC, I have to go through those stages in order to get those approvals. So when it comes to scrutinizing projects, this industry is probably one of the most scrutinized in the entire industry of any project that you do. Trying to think if there's anything else. Is there anything that...
I think that's the key questions on my checklist.
Okay. So one of the things I did want to also mention is, I do want to talk about Glen Ellen because that was brought up. I actually just got done building the tower at Glen Ellen in a neighborhood district in a sewer treatment facility. We built it there in 2016. It's been there since 2016. It's got almost every single carrier on it. Never had an issue with it. Glen Ellen approved it. They call us all the time. They're actually putting more equipment on it for themselves in the next 30 days. So we have experience building in their community as well. And they have a very, very large monopole sitting right there in Monopole, M-O-N-O-P-O-L-E. And then the only other thing I'd bring up is the school is in discussions with us to possibly utilize the tower as well for their own communications. So they've had some challenges with a antenna that they have at another tower where they're actually paying rent, and I'm working with the school to try to save them some money as well and operate a bus transmission two-way communication for them as well on the site. So it would be utilized to help hopefully reduce some costs for the school as well.
Okay. We'll probably have some more questions up
Sure.
here, but I should have read, I've got two letters I was supposed to read into the record, which I probably should have done during public comment, but I'm going to cover now. One is from a commissioner who's not present, Commissioner Orlowski. He writes, I have looked at everything for this tower site, and I would like to add a condition to this on sheet number C2A. By the new concrete apron just after the existing walkway, I would like an entrance gate to be put in and locked, something like what I have in the attachment. With all the parking issues we have now from across the street, and for safety reasons, I feel this should be added. When open, said gate would block the walking path. You can read this into the minutes of the meeting since I will not be there, but it is a concern of mine. So that's from Commissioner Mike Orlowski, who's not here this evening. And then we have a letter that we received from the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County, dated June 8th, 2023. It says, Dear Mr. Jarrett, the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County recently received a notice of public hearing regarding a petition for a special use for a new cell tower at the aforementioned property. We appreciate receiving timely notification of such requests that may have an impact on Forest Preserve District property, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. The Forest Preserve District owns York High Ridge Forest Preserve, which is located 120 feet from the proposed 125-foot cell tower location. Communication towers are some of the tallest structures across the landscape, and birds are regularly injured or deceased around these towers for various reasons. We recommend the petitioner follows the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's recommended best practices for communication tower design, siting, construction, operation, maintenance, and decommissioning, which can be found at the link below. It's long, I'm not going to read it. I assume you guys are aware of that. We hope you will allow us the opportunity to review and comment on any revisions to plans should this project move forward. Please consider this as the Forest Preserve District's request that this letter be read and entered into the public record at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to be held this evening. Please feel free to call me at 630-933-7235 if you have any questions. Sincerely, Kevin Stowe, Land Preservation Manager.
So for the gate, we will approve that gate. That's not an issue.
Yeah, we'll talk about it up here and decide if that's a condition that we want, but I think we probably will.
Okay. And then in regards to the Forest Preserve, they actually have a couple cell towers now on their properties. They're actually entertaining them now, which is somewhat interesting. But we are required to go through Fish and Wildlife for this tower, so just to go on record. That is part of the SHPO and NEPA requirement. So we are required to do all that in order to make sure that we don't affect any type of bird migration or any issues around the tower.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair,
Yes.
before you guys discuss, I have some clarifications I want to make.
Okay, please.
Yeah. So in the Villa Park zoning ordinance, Article 10, wireless telecommunication facilities, there's a specific section, 10.3.2. Applications shall not be required or be evaluated based upon the following. And it's A through I. I'm just going to call out a couple of them. B, availability of other potential locations for the placement or construction of a tower or transmission equipment. G, environmental testing, sampling, or monitoring requirements and other compliance measures for radio frequency emissions from transmission equipment that are categorically excluded from FCC rules for radio frequency emissions pursuant to 47 CFR 1.1307 D1. H, regulations or procedures for radio frequency signal strength or the adequacy of the service. And I, perceived or alleged environmental effects of radio frequency emissions as provided in 47 USC 332 C7B4.
C7B4?
C7B4.
C?
The village shall not deny any application due to the type of transmission equipment or technology to be used by the applicant or preference for type of infrastructure or technology, and shall not prohibit the placement of emergency power systems that comply with the federal and state environmental requirements. That is in our code, and it matches exactly the laws that they were speaking
I'll
of.
say yes, that's common, and it matches the federal regulations that are in place.
Mark, what section was that?
10.3.2.
Yeah.
Should probably amend that to be 5G then.
Yeah, it references the federal laws, but yeah, that's,
Sorry, the joke went over everybody's head.
oh, 5G. I got it. A little slow, but I got it.
So now, go ahead.
Okay, so we're questions from the commissions. Any specific questions up here for the applicant at this time?
I just want clarification from staff.
Yeah.
On the special use, the ultimate approval is looking for the clearance basically from High Ridge. It's just not set back 125 feet.
Correct, that's,
From what?
High Ridge Road, the road, High Ridge Road.
High Ridge, RIDGE, one word.
And
So-
then you said it's basically not set back what?
Not set back 125 feet. Correct. So had this tower, and the school district approved it, set back 125 feet, we're not having this conversation?
no, we are. The special use for the tower itself is a requirement.
Okay.
They're asking for not to be 125 feet set back the height of the pole, because they did submit the fall letter from a structural engineer that says this tower is designed to fall on itself with no more than a 50-foot radius. We worked with them to site it at 65 feet to account for the bike path, so that everything would fall outside of any public ground.
Right, and so the special use is also the approval of the tower itself. The special use is also the approval of the tower itself.
Correct.
Which the school district 88 has already
Yeah.
agreed to this lease arrangement and everything else.
That is correct. They did that before they applied for the tower for the special use.
Okay.
That's correct.
So that's one question. The other question is, I'm not asking for an explanation of the fall technology. How often do cell towers fall?
So I'll kind of start back, so that every single structure that you build has to have a required certified stamp from a structural engineer. So most buildings are required for a certain building code. Cell towers are based on the environment that they're constructed in. So if I'm not mistaken, here it's 1.5 inches of ice fully loaded on the tower with all the equipment that it could possibly hold, what it's designed for, with a 90-mile-an-hour burst of wind constant for 3 seconds. If that structure can meet that with the foundation, the steel, the pole, everything else, it passes what we call structural. If it does not, you have a choice of having to modify the tower, which is basically you have to stiffen it with basically steel rods or some kind of, what we call it flat plank rod stiffeners, or there may be some foundation type enhancements that you may have to do if that tower was overloaded. Legacy towers back in the day, built in the 90s, when I first started, they were built pretty light. Like they were not designed for what we call co-location standards. The towers that we're building today, we're beefing them up substantially. And the reason is because we're expecting the additional carriers on there, and the equipment is usually pretty heavy and loading. So we designed the towers for, an AT&T situation, we're literally designing the top rad center for what we call 40,000 square inches of loading, with up to, it's well over 3,000 pounds just at that location on the tower. So it's a 10-foot of, or no, actually it's 12 feet of vertical space. It has to meet that code with multiple carriers. So to answer your question, there are some legacy towers that have fallen over. I can't lie to you. I can't sit here and say that that doesn't happen. Yeah, there's been towers that have collapsed. Guide towers, which have the cables, have a tendency to get a little bit more risky because there's a lot of maintenance on those. You got to torque them down. They have to be torque spec basically every single year. Those have a tendency, if you don't maintain them, you could put those at risk. But lattice towers and monopoles, pretty much so, very, very hardy in the sense of the way that they're constructed. And we show all that prior, in our construction drawings and permitting, to make sure that we are building a very robust tower. And just to give you an idea, the company that makes cell phone towers is literally the same company that usually makes your very tall utility poles that are made out of steel. It's literally the same, almost the same design. Just the utility poles are obviously staggered in lines. I have had towers. I've had 2 towers go through massive environmental nightmares. I've had one that went through the Joplin EF5. Joplin EF5 tornado. So Joplin, Missouri, basically is leaning like that. All the houses underneath it are leveled. I actually have a picture of it on my computer. Tower's still standing, equipment's still on the tower, but everything underneath it is gone. So if you're at that kind of catastrophe level, you better be worrying about houses before you're worrying about a cell tower. And then we had one that went through in Puerto Rico, went through Maria. And it's sitting at a substation, standing up, and that was a Category 5 hurricane. The road is absolutely gone. There's nothing around it. The only 2 things that are standing, surprisingly, is the utility area where there was, oh gosh, what do they call those? It's substation. It's a substation. All the substation equipment's still there, and the cell tower's right next to it. Everything else is gone. So, does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
So now they're designed, this one is designed to bend.
Yep.
The break point. So all the weight's at the top, it's designed to fall on itself. So
Okay.
it does,
Rather than
it really
go like a
hard.
tree.
Yeah.
It won't pull up like by the roots, like you see a tree pull up by the roots, that will never happen. These caissons are down 30 feet from concrete, they're not pulling up by the roots. That's for sure.
What's down 30 feet?
The caisson, the
Say it
cement
again.
foundation.
Caisson?
Caisson?
Yes.
C-A-I-S-O-N, I think, caisson foundation.
Yeah, C-A-I-S-S-O-N.
That's
Yeah.
Yes. So what they do is, when you build a monopole, it's a sleeve design. So you have one sleeve, like a sleeve. So the sleeve slips over top of the next, so it's almost like a Lego set, per se. It just snap, and then it's bolted together. Those bolt points are where they design and engineer that it would just, so if you had a catastrophe, it would literally snap at the bolt point. That's what it would do. That's how we can get it to confine into that area. And the reason why we placed the tower where we were, we met with the school multiple times, and we were just trying to be the least intrusive in the sense of the property for the usage of the field behind it. But there's also a little bit of an elevation mound for, I don't know why that's there. I don't know if it's just a view shed or something, but we were just trying to plan it out to where it was just simplistic on the property.
Answer your questions?
Yes, it does.
Any other questions down this way?
Just a point of clarification for one of the things, the fall letter for this specific tower has a ultimate wind speed rating of 115 miles an hour without ice, and a sustained 40 mile an hour with 3/4 ice.
Okay.
That's designed for this one.
So I was off. Sorry.
There may be other ones that are that, but that's this one here.
Yeah, so I think Michigan ice ratio is higher than your ratio. So I apologize, I'm referencing more Michigan, so I will admit that I was wrong. Sorry.
I had a question, it's a construction question regarding the drive over the bituminous path.
Yes.
And over the bituminous path, the pedestrian path. And I was concerned about traffic over that, and if there's car or truck traffic ever over there, I was concerned about that deteriorating, because the pedestrian path is designed for pedestrians.
Correct.
And I was suggesting possibly the apron be extended as concrete.
We could do that, but we are also responsible for maintaining that. So if it did break up, or there was any issue like in construction or in the future, we are responsible for making sure that easement is actually taken care of. So if the asphalt does deteriorate, we would be responsible for making sure that that's maintained.
Okay. Would that be reconstructed? I'm sure during construction, especially if they're constructing caissons, they will.
The likelihood of that path surviving the construction on the initial is pretty slim to none. So we are likely to come in there and cut that all out and re-pour it to where it will match with the entrance with a new sublayer underneath it. I am by far not a construction expert in the sense of what it is actually we would be submitting to the village to take care of, but I would not have a problem doing that. It's not an issue. And I don't want to speak out of line if that's not currently planned, but if that's something that you would request, I do not have an issue with it, to make sure that it's reinforced and.
It'll become part of the driveway.
Yes.
Yes, I would recommend
Yeah,
that.
there's no traffic, once the tower's built, there's no traffic.
Yeah.
Just a technician, maybe in a pickup truck or something, might open the gate and pull in.
So one of the things that we have found, and this may sound a little childish, but sometimes on those walking paths, people like to skateboard, rollerblade, things of that nature. Usually when you got to do concrete, you got to put seams in.
Yeah.
People hate seams. So what we try to do is we try to keep that asphalt in that kind of, if we can, instead of bringing that apron up. Because sometimes people don't like that transition when they're with their kids from going from an asphalt to concrete, because sometimes you get the elevated kind of, just, it's like a trip hazard. It's just something that I've seen personally, but
Yes.
again, it's up to you.
Okay, well, it could be thickened asphalt as well.
Yes, yes, it absolutely would be, with a sub base underneath it.
Okay, and one final question is the maintenance. Is that a monthly thing, like the grass being cut around it, and the trees trimmed and things like that?
So the school would be responsible ultimately for the grass around it. The inside the compound is basically like a crushed limestone or crushed gravel. I don't know the exact stone that they use. But it is our responsibility as the owner of the asset we have to make sure that that's treated so that there's no weeds coming up through there or any type of issue. So we have a master maintenance plan where we have a contractor that comes out every 6 months. They're responsible for documenting the site with photographs, not only with the tower, but they have to look at the compound. They have to give us a report. They look at the fencing. I won't lie to you. There's times where we've had incidents where snowplows come in and then they push the snow up against the fence, bow our fences in. We got to send a team out there, redo the fence or something of that magnitude. That is all our responsibility. We're not there to put additional burden on the school as the landowner, but they are responsible for the grass around it because that's actually still their property. But the landscaping is on us. So if that landscaping was to die or if it got out of control, we are responsible for maintaining that, not the school, as Tower Co.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any questions? No. Eric or Justin?
Yes. Distance-wise, linearly, as the crow flies, use your own terminology, what is the distance from the base of the tower to the nearest actual school structure? Because it's cutting through linearly through the football fields. Do you know the distance?
I don't.
We can get that in 1 second.
So would you be talking about the distance from the actual, like the base of the tower to the closest building?
Correct.
Per se? Okay. Because the football field, I believe, is due south.
South by southwest, correct.
Okay.
Due south. I mean, there's two. The field is basically right there. Like you're building on essentially the northwest corner of the field, of that grassed area.
Yeah, okay, so I
So
think,
my question is, from the base that you're proposing, linearly, what is the distance between the base of the tower to the actual next nearest building?
yeah.
825 feet.
Okay, and what is it from the entry or the next concrete wall or brick wall of the Islamic Center?
About 225 feet, give or take.
Yeah, it's directly across the street, so
Yep.
200 feet.
Okay, and then to the west, the tree line that is technically within the village of Lombard,
Yes.
or the city of Lombard, and then
No, that's the forest preserve.
the forest preserve, but
In the village.
but it's in
Forest preserve,
it's
correct.
in Lombard, correct?
I think it's unincorporated DuPage County.
Oh, okay.
You missed that one.
But is the village boundary line the tree line?
The Villa Park boundary line is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Confirmed it is unincorporated.
Unincorporated, but that's the boundary line between the two towns or villages.
The property line's actually a bit west of the tree line. So if you look at,
It's like within.
if you look at the site survey B1, the property line is actually 120 feet away from the west property line.
I see the red line, yeah.
Yeah,
On
and there's the
page
measurement there at
4.
120, yeah.
Page 4. Thank you.
Yep.
Mark, have you had any of your cohorts of your position for the Village of Villa Park from other municipalities reach out with any positive or negative feedback with regards to similar 5G cell towers that have been put up, let's say, within the last 3 years?
No. We did have a conversation with Ducom this afternoon, and they do not have an issue with this tower going in their location. They have a tower at the station 80, well, the south station. I don't want to get the number wrong. The south. 81. Thank you. The station 81.
Okay. I believe that's it. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, anything else up here? Any other questions before we move on?
Is there any, I mean, I'm looking at a website and certainly don't know the accuracy of this, but within Villa Park or the Villa Park area, do we actually know a count of how many cell towers are around? I mean, I say this out of, I don't want to act like this is the only one that's going to be up. I mean, once you start looking for these things, cell towers and antennas are everywhere. So I don't want to either judge for or against, you know.
Take a look
based
at the
on-
water tower next door.
Right, exactly. So.
We do not have a count. That was one of the things that we were trying to figure out, but we just don't have that data. But yes, the water tower across the street just got new infrastructure put on last.
Right, like towers and/or antennas, right? I mean, because antennas can be on non-tower structures, so.
So yeah, there's cell service on the tower across the way, but we do not have a number.
Just, in a few years ago, we approved one at D48. I'm blanking on the name, Albright.
Albright.
Say it again.
Albright Middle School.
That's, the site has that one listed, and then it looks like there's a tower.
Yeah, that was, I can't tell you exactly how long ago, it was probably 5 to 8 years ago. All right, any other questions? All right, any closing comments before we move to discussion up here?
I just thank you for your time. If you have any additional questions, please let me
Okay,
know.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, discussion among the commission. So, sounds like there's, staff has recommended, Commissioner Orlowski mentioned the condition regarding the installation of a gate. I think that's good for a number of reasons. First of all, I mean, besides parking, it's also a curb cut that would provide easy access for hoodlums and miscreants into school property, for lack of a better term. So that's a good idea. The applicant has said that they would be amenable to that condition, so whoever makes the motion should add that condition. Any other discussion?
I don't
No.
Anything?
Do we feel that the responses provided satisfy our commissioner's request with regard to the grounding of the asphalt or any other ground structure or ground material?
It's hard to condition. Is that a public, is the bike path on in the public right away, or is it in private property? I mean, I guess that's probably on the survey, huh?
It's private on the school property.
What do you think about
Still
that?
You can still make the recommendation that the asphalt is at a thickened or larger base. I'm fine with that. I do agree that the transition from the concrete to asphalt would be better served at the approach as opposed to through the bike path.
Yes, as a cyclist, we hate seams.
Right, and when the bike path does get milled and overlaid, now you don't have a chunk of concrete in the way. Long-term
And the
maintenance.
bike path gets what?
Milled and overlaid. But at least if it's thickened with a thicker base, like a driveway, you would.
If there's no other discussion, then I would entertain a motion with those two conditions.
Okay. Recommend approval of PZ, or I will make a motion to recommend approval of PZ 2302 for a special use for a new cell tower as described on Exhibit A with two conditions. One, to gate the access on the south side of the bike path, and two, to make the asphalt of the easement with a thickened base.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, roll call vote. Ludke,
Yes.
Romano,
Yes.
Shalinski,
Yes.
Lemieux.
Yes.
I too vote yes. With that, our recommendation will advance to the village board. We are a recommending body. We are not the final decision maker. So you do have an opportunity to be heard by your elected officials if you choose to do so. The agendas for those meetings will be published, and I'm sure there will be a first and probably a second reading on that. Or just one reading because it's an ordinance, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So watch your agendas if you have thoughts or concerns. So I'll close the public hearing. And what I would say is, to everybody that came out, I appreciate that you came out. I've said it a few times before, we're usually up here in front of no one. So it's good when people come out and are a part of the process. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move to comments on non-agenda items? Is there anyone wishing to speak on non-agenda items at this time? All right, just wait a second. All right. Seeing no one wanting to comment on non-agenda items, Mark, do you have any comments, updates?
No, just a reminder that we will be meeting on June 22nd at 7 o'clock for the comprehensive plan initial discussion.
Okay, any,
7 o'clock?
7 unless you guys want to do it earlier. I pushed for 7, but I don't know. You know how I feel about this.
I'm fine with 7, but
I think 7 is the
7 is...
earliest I'm going to get here.
Totally fine.
That's also the date of the Environmental Concerns Commission, though, so are they just going to take the back room again?
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. That's in, 2 weeks?
yes.
22nd?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I got it. At 7, that's fine. Just any other, no other updates or anything that's been
Not really.
passed? Anything on the docket besides the comp?
One update, the text amendments did
Yeah.
pass first and final reading without discussion.
Okay.
The text amendments that we forwarded.
The fences and all that, yeah. It's done. That is now,
The cleanup items?
Cleanup stuff, yeah.
Okay,
now-
fantastic.
it is now code, yep.
Right, any other comments, discussion? All right,
tonight.
motion to adjourn,
So moved.
second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.